Ndwandwa, director of Geek Imprint, and we're going to be talking about the business of photography. He is now in studio. Good afternoon, Phakamani. Welcome to the show, and thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Good afternoon, Thandi.
All right.
Thanks for the invite.
All right. And to take into Okubana, because it is the month of love, and throughout this month until it ends, actually, I ask each and every one of my guests this specific question, and there are no exceptions. So, the question is, what does love mean to you?
Ooh, it's a fully loaded question. But in the true essence of love, for most of us, the one love aspect that we can definitely talk about is that of a mother. And
Okay.
the reason for that is life begins with a mother. Life begins at conception. And therefore, love is about sacrifice. Love is about time. Love is about understanding just exactly how we can have people be in a position whereby they can show affection without having to do things that are extreme, something that comes straight from the heart. So, yeah, this one people are going to shoot me for, but it's fine.
What are you gonna say? You're making me worried there, but come.
Yeah, the thing is we have, unfortunately, as a society, redefined love for all the wrong reasons. By
Okay.
saying that is that love is more about how much you spend rather in terms of monetary value, not so much about time value. So the
Sure,
thing about
sure.
money is the fact that you buy it, you get it, but you forget it. But if you look at mother's love, you can never, I can tell you right now, from beatings you get as a child, from how you were shouted at for missing a curfew, from the time that you had to learn how to make food, from the time you learn how to drive a car, like those things, regardless of anything, you can never put any monetary value. So
Sure.
then that is why for a person like me, love goes back to the essence of what is a mother and the attributes of a mother towards their children. So that is love for me. Not only effort.
Le 14th of February. All right. I think it's very interesting. From all the guests, this is the first perspective I've had.
Okay.
From all the guests I've been engaging with and conversing with from the beginning of the month, I think this is a different picture. The picture of the love that is expressed by mother to child, and maybe vice versa, like that true, pure kind of a love. And throughout this month, the Tedile Indobana, love is broader than just the confinement of romantic relationship
Yes.
I didn't want to get into the when I get you are also
nitty-gritty.
no,
Yeah.
but and as a result now I was saying it even begins with you loving yourself. That's an expression of love, you to
Deeply,
yourself,
deeply.
and then also us loving each other as people, not then ikona ke as a category na relationships, romantic relationships, so quite interesting. Now, today we're talking about the business of photography, ne?
Yes.
And the first question that I want to ask is just about how the idea to start the business came about. When did you start the business, and how did it happen that you decided, you know what, I'm gonna start Geek Imprint?
Right. The story behind it all is the fact that back in 2007, 2006, I was in high school and I used to have a V360 back then, like the coolest phone any child could have.
Okay.
And I would take pictures. And because the memory was filling up very quickly, I'd print these pictures. So that's how it got into the essence of it, of loving it, And then fast forward a couple of years later, 2010, got my first, digital camera. It so happened that I went on a trip, and on that trip, unfortunately, it fell in the sand. So, my mother brought me this thing. So I was like, "Ish, how do you explain this? Like, this thing fell, So I decided to keep quiet. And from keeping quiet, I was actually raising money on the side. And
To replace it.
Yeah. So then once I had enough money to replace, I then went and bought another one. And that's the time that I actually told her what happened to the first one. So I had the new one, and then I had the
old one.
So she was like, okay, that's
Can be
fine.
forgiven now that there's
that's
a plan.
But then the following day, she then called me, and then she refunded me the full amount of the new one.
Wow.
And for me, it's like, hey, at times, we expect, because at times our parents are strict, you're expecting that if ever
Kwenzeka into enje,
something
you gotta get
happens,
it.
then, you are going to be up against it. So that's what happened. But then over the years, I was like, I had a tournament, a debating tournament in 2017. It was a national tournament. And then I remember discussing with the organizing committee and say, guys, we need to take pictures. And we do have phones and all of that, and it's going to look good, but we need something that's just really going to
Professional.
stick. So then I ended up buying this camera, and it worked for the purpose of the tournament.
Sure.
And in working for the tournament, it's like, then 2018 is like, what does one do with this camera, because it's here? And I started watching a couple of YouTube videos, and I started to begin to know how to work with the camera and stuff like that. And then I started growing. But then what I then picked up is that I linked up with the entrepreneurs program for the Borderkine Chamber of Business. And in doing so, then it came to light, in terms for things to happen. So there was like a slot to work at the mall, and you take pictures. And then in order for that to happen, they wanted to deal with registered businesses.
Okay.
And that's when it came about to register business, so that now it's easier to have a number that you can also register with. What's the name? Is it ECDC, so that they actually put you on their database in order for, if ever there are functions or something like that, it needs someone in that particular field,
They
then
can be
they're
able to make use of your company.
Then they give off a list, and then that company would actually do their due diligence, and then they find the company that they want to work with. So that's how I came to registering a company. Although,
Interesting.
fair enough, I'd say that was a very good thing in terms of that. But, also you start to learn on the different scales you work on.
Okay.
So now when I talk about the different scales, is that there's a thing where, like, I shoot generally weekends. That's when I
Okay.
get the time to work, because
You're
I'm a
busy with
teacher,
other things.
during the week, and then it's a photography on weekends. And I don't do it as commercially
As you could.
as I should.
Okay.
And then, when I say commercially, is that, you get a commercial photographer that, their shoot or their call out fee is nothing less than, let's say, than 5,000 Rand. So that's the starting point. So these people do this on an everyday basis. This is their income.
Sure,
This
sure.
is
They're
their
100%
life.
in.
Yeah, they're 100% in. Whereas on a person on my end is that I'm in, but at the same time, there's time that I can afford off,
Sure,
whereas someone
sure.
else can't. Then you get another photographer who will, during the week and every other day, is available because that's their main source of income. So therefore, that's another thing that one needs to really decipher when it comes to
Sure,
business, is that
sure.
what type of business is it? Although I haven't had a thing whereby I've had to turn down a shoot.
Okay.
Because
you're still able to juggle everything that you're doing.
more or less, yes.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing, is that if you're getting to a point where you're saying, I'm not taking that, it's a problem.
All right. Before we continue, I wanted to ask as well the name.
Right.
Geek Imprint. What does it mean, and how did that come?
Right. So generally what happened is it actually comes from the work that I've done over the last 14 years when it comes to debating. And what actually took the chance in terms of becoming pro in terms of photography was actually doing marketing related work for different debating projects.
Okay.
So that's where it actually started, with the different work that I was doing for debating, taking pictures of speakers, doing posters, and having to do all of that. So the thing about the imprint part was the fact that, that's what you impart onto other people in terms of them learning a bit from you.
Okay.
So that's what it means to imprint. So the geeky part was more or less like, it needs to be not just any kind of imprint, more than it needs to be an educated one. All right. So then I had two options, which was Geek Imprint, which is an educated imprint. The other one also was imprint, but it was optical imprint. Optical, more or less working with the eye. So it's an eye imprint, so whatever you see that deserves a mention, whatever you see that deserves to be captured with your eye and imagination, that's what you then have, an optical imprint with what
Okay.
you see with your eye, whereas the Geek Imprint was centered around understanding the general ethos around how debaters, public speakers often get referred to as geeks.
Geeks.
So it was a merger of those two names.
Interesting. Very, very interesting. Another question I wanted to ask is, do you think that photography and the business of photography should be based on skill, passion, or education?
I think it's a mixture of all of them.
Okay.
Right. So the reason I say it's a mixture of all of them is that you can get a camera, shoot your shots, and put them out there. It means absolutely nothing. The thing about photography, I think you'll get a sense of it in the sense that when you start seeing someone buying the first camera, they buy the next lens, they buy the next thing, they buy a camera, they buy a lens, they buy lighting, they buy soft boxes, they buy reflectors, and you start seeing all of these things come together, and you're like, but wasn't the essence of photography just to take the picture?
Okay.
What's up with the
Everything
other thing?
else.
Yes. So that's when now passion would be a case whereby there's a particular lens you use, and I want to travel, but I just have this camera and I just want to take this one lens with me. And then as I travel, I take pictures of the different places that I'm going to. So generally at times it would just be architecture, you know,
Okay.
the different structures that you see. Then you move about in terms of understanding a bit of skill. Now, skill comes into the fact that photography in itself is being able to paint with light. So when we're painting with light, is that's what we actually see, is that what kind of light works for what. So then that's where the discussion, if you've around the media circles especially, comes in when it comes to different complexions.
Okay.
So you do have certain photographers who would like the fairer skin. You do have photographers that like the lighter skin. So everyone has a different sort of preference, you know, in terms of what melanin works when it comes to photography. Then also comes the education part, is that you need to know about lighting. You need to know
Need to
about,
learn.
you know, how to set up what we call composition. So if you are composing a shot, you know, when you look at where the person is in the picture, you know, is the person, is it a close-up shot? Is it a wide angle? Why a close-up? Why a wide angle sort of shot that you are going for? So these are some of the things that you need to know. And also then with the lighting perspectives, like you've got, like now at the moment, you've got your soft boxes. So what they encourage is also how do you soften the light in terms of how it hits on the skin. So even with lighting, you've got like with the
Different
lights here in
kinds.
studio. So you have, this is like part of your continuous light. Then you've got your
Spot.
your flashes, speed lights. Then you got your ambient light, which is your natural light. So knowing how to work with what, you know. So yeah,
a
it's a bit
combination of
complex,
everything.
but you take it one step at a time.
And being exposed in the photography space, I'm going to ask you two questions. Ne? The first one is, the first one, before we get to this one, the first one is, what are some of the common mistakes that are made within the photography space? Whether, you know, you are going to be, you know, responding to this based on your personal experience in terms of what you've done, like the mistakes you've done, or in terms of what you see other photographers doing. But just, and I'm asking you this question for the sake of maybe a young person listening in and who has an interest to get into photography, so that they don't, you know, duplicate those mistakes as well. Yeah, but you know, type of thing. So what are some of the mistakes that are made around the photography space that, and Klambi, you could even go to a point of talking about those that could even hinder your business. So you don't get that call again, you don't get that client again,
Okay.
type
So
of situation.
the two perspectives that I'm going to speak on, it is you dealing with self and you dealing with clients, right? So the thing about self is that you can't believe that you know everything,
Okay.
all right? Because every situation you shoot in will always be different.
Okay.
So the best thing to do, firstly, as a person learning photography, is getting to know the abilities of the camera.
Okay.
What is it that your camera can do? What is it other cameras that other people are using can do?
Okay.
What is the common thing?
Sure.
And the common thing that you're going to find is that they all work with light.
Okay.
So if you know how to control light or want to learn photography, you need to know how to work with it. So now you have light where at 12 p.m. the sun is straight up, and then you're trying to take a shot. And if you look at it through the viewfinder, if you look at it through the screen, you can't really see the person's eyes because there's so much
Sun, yeah.
in their eye. So now what do you do in order to just calm it? So that is something when I say you need to learn what your camera can do and how it does it. Because from having used two systems, I started off with Canon, I'm using Fujifilm. They're different systems, they do different things, but the common thing that they both have is that they work with light.
Sure.
So that's the one thing that you can't escape, regardless of whichever system you're using,
Okay.
that they work with light. Secondly, is understanding the difference between sharpness and autofocus. Right, so focus is one that the person is in focus, you can see them. Sharpness is how well you can see them in the picture.
Clarity, like.
All right. So it would be a case whereby how well sharpness would be a case of, are you, when there's movement maybe at the time that you press the button to take the photo, because you're holding it, as you press the button, there's a bit of movement that your hands
Happens,
have
okay.
with the trigger. So now that can cause a bit of distortion in terms of the picture being in focus or being blurry. You see. So then having to learn the triangle, which is then your shutter speed, your f-stop, and how your ISO work, those are different things. That's like the language of photography. So if you know those three things, then that's a start. Then on the client sort of side is the situation where you need to, as a person, build communication skills with clients.
Okay.
So when we build communication skills, what we're saying is that before I do the shoot, what are your colors? Where are you shooting from?
Sure,
What time
sure,
of day
sure.
would you like to shoot? Right? So then you have that information. You go out to where you are going to have the shoot. Evaluate the scene.
Before.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Evaluate the scene and know exactly what is it that you're going to be shooting and how. So if you're going to be shooting groups, would they be standing in the shade? Would they be standing in the light? Or do you want the shade? Like, shade is not necessarily a bad thing. Light is also not necessarily a bad thing, but the type of shot you're trying to compose
Okay.
determines how you take the shot. So if you're taking a lower angle shot, what are you trying to project? If you're taking it from the top, what are you projecting? If you're taking like
Straight.
front on, what is it also that you are trying to really sell? Because remember, the time that you do post any work and everything, generally the one thing you'd like to start is a conversation more than the likes that people anticipate.
Okay.
So therefore, if you have, let's say, 30 comments and 2 likes, that means that there's a success rate with that particular photo because you've engineered a conversation. Whereas if it's a like, you're not sure where exactly
The person
you stand.
stands.
Because you have 500 likes, but what is it people that are liking? But if you have 500 comments about what people like, it's a different story.
Sure.
So that is the evaluation thereof. So it is very important that we build relationships with the people that we call our
the
clients,
clients,
and have that conversation prior to the thing. Because I'm fortunate enough to use a system whereby I can generate what we call film simulations. So I take one shot, and then within the film simulations, there are 14 different sort of lighting scenarios that a person can choose from, and then they say that's
That's
one.
the setting I want.
Then I focus on that.
Oh,
You
interesting.
see, because at times you take the shot, everything looks good, sharp, whatever the case is, but then in terms of the lighting, the person doesn't like. And then lastly on this, it also boils down to preference, because you have people, you will find that they do skin retouching and some people that don't. I'm one of the people that don't. I choose not to. It's a preference thing, you see. So that can either gain you clients, that could also lose you clients. It depends, because people have different preferences.
Sure.
So that's why generally I would focus on family photography. I would
Okay.
focus a bit on portfolio photography, because they want like portfolios. There's no agent that wants skin retouching. They want everything in its purest form.
Yes,
So therefore,
yes.
if the person producing the purest form, that's the clientele that I'm looking
You're
for.
looking- sure,
So then
sure.
there's also fashion photography, which fashion differs, because you can't tell me if a person is wearing something from the 70s, 60s, whatever the case is.
The
they're out of-
look and feel should be
they're out
different
of fashion. That person is in fashion because that's their style. Similar thing with photographers. There's different styles to photographers. So the people, you see a particular picture without even looking at the watermark, if there's
You
one.
know it belongs to
You know it belongs to a
X.
particular person because that is their style.
Interesting. And one of the other questions that I was going to actually ask is, what makes you different? You know, in the space, I mean, Queenstown is for an example, Queenstown is small. I don't know if your scope is only here, and you find that there are a couple of photographers, people are running their businesses here, ne? And what makes you different? What do you think makes you different? Okanye, what do you purposely use to make yourself different, stand out? From the other photographers that might be around.
Right, that's a very nice question. And the best way that I can answer that question is be willing to learn.
Okay.
Learn from your clients.
Okay.
Learn from other people. The thing is that with photography, you can never say you've learned enough.
Okay.
So, for instance, about 3 weeks ago, I learned how to do what we call long exposure, where I was actually shooting at Glen waterfalls, and you make the water look as though it's still, although it's moving.
Interesting.
All right. So the settings on your camera help with that. Hence, I said in the beginning, you need to, as a photographer, build a relationship with your camera, and then therefore, then you start to know different things. This is what I should do. This is what I shouldn't do. So again, that's what I would say makes me different, is that I love doing research more than I love shooting, actually, because before I shoot, I need to know exactly what I'm going for.
Sure.
If ever shooting in a particular area at a certain time of day, then I need to produce as per the day allows.
Sure.
If the day does not allow, then we have a bit of an issue. And then the other thing that often happens, that is a fight between clients and photographers, is the terms and conditions.
Okay.
So terms and conditions, I'd say it's a matter of trying to make them rigid, but at the same time, they still speak to a person.
Okay.
So what I mean about that is that if I'm going to have, let's say, an outdoor shoot, it rains like it did last week Friday. So then the person is not at fault for you to say you forfeit your appointment because this is what happened. Right? Because it's a natural disaster.
Sure.
So again, the one thing that we need to look into is that it's not supposed to be about greed, but how we actually make it a win-win situation for both the client and me as the service provider.
Yeah.
Because if we're not going to do that, and it's all about greed and profit, then that, I think, is the one thing that really would put me in a different sort of zone from my
counterparts, your other,
yes.
All right, last question in about 2 minutes or so. It's the month of February. Do you have anything that you've planned? As Geek Imprint is doing a program you're running, anything along those lines?
Right. So the month of February, fortunately for me, is not just Valentine's, which is a good thing. It's also a birthday month. So one of the things that I've adopted in the last 8 or so years is that I've been doing this thing whereby I would generally just choose to do something instead of receiving, let's say, like a gift for my birthday. Generally, what I would then do is that I would actually look at what I can give back. So like last year, what I did was that there was, what's the name, a shelter that was in need of food. So my sister and I joined ventures, and we decided to get like vegetables, like half a truck of vegetables, and donate that
to the shelter,
to that shelter. And then the year before that, it was a case of I had someone whom their father had helped me immensely, in terms of being able to be mobile, that sort of thing, and fixing my car, and like he went above and beyond, like with some of the things that I needed. And so what happened was I saw, he's late at the moment, unfortunately. So his daughter was like, she was having some troubles with her tires, that sort of thing. She'd patch this one, and then a couple of weeks, how our roads are in Queenstown. So as part of that, I decided, let me just buy the 4 tires. Yes, it takes from my pocket, but
you
the memory that you that you're giving that person to also create, like I was given, is something that you can't actually put a value about. So then this year, the focus is again finding about 4 or 5 people, where this time around, looking at a way that we can promote the person's business through photography and a bit of videography as well. So that is what I'm doing at the moment. I've found 2 out of the 5, so I am still in the zone of looking for the other 3. And also, it's not just a case of just promoting the business now, but also just how looking far more beyond just now in terms of how to promote that.
Interesting, beautiful, and thank you so much for that. I think I don't know what criteria you use, but it's a beautiful thing. Giving back is always beautiful, and I think it's very mature of you and commendable, because really people can be me on birthdays, and I think it's a different way of treating a birthday of giving back. I think it's quite beautiful and quite commendable. And if someone wants to make use of your services, could you just give us your contact number before we bounce?
Okay. So if you're on Facebook and Instagram, and you go online and you type in Geek Imprint, which is a GEEK Imprint, IMPRINT, then you should be able to find, something that's up there. Because also, thank you for actually asking that. The other thing that makes one different is how the company in itself, prior to the enforcement of the Poppy Act, was always compliant.
Okay.
And that means that we can have multiple shoots, but with the Poppy Act is that with every shoot, even prior to this, it was always a case of getting permission to put people's photos online, because remember, I might not know that Thandi is under witness protection and her name is not Thandi, and there's someone who's looking for Thandi's family, and then what do I do? They see a picture. They see a picture, and to make it worse, we do what we call geotagging, Phakamani Studios, that sort of thing.
The place,
So now the thing that comes about is that
you'll be found.
Thandi. And that's also one of the things that I always say to parents before nitumelo bundle of joy eskolweni. Try and wait it out, even if it's in the month of February, that utumdana useskolweni, whatever.
Don't make it today.
Because we do have human traffickers, unfortunately. So that's something that we need to be extremely mindful of, that those human traffickers are zlelang.
Ish.
Yeah. So and then the last number is 078 1904 101. So it's Geek Imprint in terms of being able to find me on Instagram, in terms of Facebook, and then the number of 078 1904 101.
Thank you so much for your time.
I'm also chuffed in terms of being here. It's something that is, it's
quite interesting, hey?
Yeah, at times we need to have these conversations, especially business and people understanding the essence of why other people do business.
Yeah.
And generally answering the question of what problem are you
trying to solve. Beautiful, and that's where we need to end it for today.
Definitely.
All right, lovely with Uganda Community Radio. Interesting conversation that we've just had with Phakamani Ndwandwa, talking the business of photography. So many interesting things. I will touch on them when we come back from the ad break. So many beautiful things. Make sure that you don't go anywhere.